Hello folks, welcome to my YouTube channel, Watercolor Impressions. This week we are going to learn how to take a dull greyish street from Toronto and make it look interesting. Before you go, hit the subscribe button so you guys can get weekly video updates from my channel. And I'll provide the drawing template and reference. Check my description, download it. And I also want to expedite the process. So I did my drawing and I'm throwing down my first wash using a little bit of yellow ochre and a little bit of white paint in it. So the first half of the tutorial, first half of the lesson, I'll be taking more about how to make our painting interesting, and the next half I'll talk about the tips and techniques and everything. So before, when you put down your first wash or anything you do in your painting, the first thing you have to come up is your motive and vision, and what kind of mood you're trying to portray in your painting, and what kind of vision you have in your painting, and what's your focal point. So I want my focal point to be the foreground, and you can see there's only one person walking in the foreground, but I added two people, and there's also other two person who is standing inside the shop. So this also creates a little bit of composition element, and that also helps us to take a lead in our painting. And I'm also going to make this a really contrasty painting, and I'll be focusing details on the foreground than the rest of the painting. And if you see look at the reference looks really grayish and look dull. If I would have painted as it is, and I would have been appreciated for the techniques and how I handled my watercolors, but it wouldn't look interesting. But I want to make sure that I want to express my artwork in such a way that it look interesting. Being said that, when I finish the painting, when I show this painting to someone, some people find it interesting and some people may not, and it depends on the person. So, but as a beginner, this also helps to focus on the things we can on our painting, then we can leave the rest alone. For example, you can see as I'm talking, in a couple of minutes I finished my sky as well as my background. And in the background you can see there is like a white grayish building in the background, even though it was like that, but I added some colors and I made it to push a little bit away from the foreground. And in any kind of painting you do, cool colors go in distance and warm colors come in the foreground. So I'll be introducing a lot of warm colors in the foreground, and you can see the background is more of a lot of cool colors in it. So now I'm focusing on the midground buildings. So the midground buildings, I will have a little bit of details than the background, because background going to act as a background for us. So that's the only purpose it's going to serve. Whereas in the midground, we're going to have a little bit of details in it. In this building, I'll focus a little bit more time on it than the rest of the painting as well. And you can see this also combining the foreground as well. So I want to make sure that I'm adding some more details on it. So I'm also using wet on wet technique. You can see I blocked in the big shape. So the big shape for this building is square, rectangular, but it's going in perspective. And as soon as I put down my wash, I try to put down my darkest tone at the top, so it bleeds and creates this beautiful gradient. And it also enhances a little bit of lighting in as well. So I'll do the same thing. You can see when I started painting from the background, I start on the left hand side, and I'll slowly combine everything together. So if you think everything and paint everything as one single shape, it doesn't look really good. It's always really necessary in watercolors to combine everything as a single shape. It also makes your life easier, and it also makes your painting look really fresh. And you can see there's a couple of signboards, and this is where I was talking about the focal point. So this is where I want to make my painting look interesting. So I'm going to put a lot of details on the foreground, and I also want to make this painting as a rainy scene. I know it's kind of like a really wintry day in the late evening, and there's going to be a lot of light reflecting on the ground, and it has been raining and it stopped, but there's a lot of reflection from the lights on the shop from the right hand side and the left hand side. And you can see once I put on the light wash on the left hand side and the right hand side, there's a little bit of value change there, because I want this foreground to come in front, whereas in the midground building I don't want that to read at all. So I put a little bit of less wash on it, and I used a lot of water on it. So in watercolors, it's really easy to make your values lighter and darker. So if you take a paint, if you use a lot of water in your brush and if you paint it, it will give a light value once it dries out. If you take less water and if you paint it as it is, it will give the right value for it. But this comes by experience, but as you do it, you will have your own way of painting as well. And you can see I started doing the figures. So those scars which is in the mid-crown, even though such thing doesn't exist, I don't want that space to be really blank, so I'm kind of like adding some details in the mid-crown as well. And I'm also making sure that the car I added as a single shape. I don't want to add a lot of details on it because our focal point is the foreground. I don't want the viewer's attention to go anywhere else in my painting. So this is our major figure. So every painting I do, I have one figure, it kind of like make a Euro figure. So Euro figure nothing but I'll put a lot of details for him. So that figure acts as like our actor for our scene. And now I'm doing the second wash for the reflection to be on the ground. So for this I'm using a little bit of white paint and a little bit of the dirt in my palette. So what I mean by that, like whatever dirt left in my palette, I'm mixing with the white paint. I just put it there, and I let it dry for a little bit of a couple of minutes. Then I paint my reflections, and you can see in a matter of second we painted the reflections really fast. But I'm also making sure that the reflection I painted on the mid-crown is now reading darker than the foreground. And you can see as soon as I add a little bit of darker tone on the cars which is in the foreground, we kind of enhance perspective and depth in our painting. And I also want the reflections from the shop, and there's also the doors which is also reflecting in the foreground as well. So now I'm adding the tertiary details. So the tertiary details are nothing but enhancing the details whatever you have. And I also want to make sure again I'm not trying to enhance a lot of details in anywhere else than my foreground. So I'll be focusing on more on my foreground building now. You can see I'm taking my white paint, and sometimes it's really hard to leave eyelets when you paint, and sometimes I try to enhance the eyelets using white paint. I use Chinese white watercolor paint, but I don't use any water in it. I use it fresh out of the tube. And you can also use gouache as well. You can see as soon as we add those eyelets in our scene, it kind of gives that really nice look in our painting. And it also enhances a little bit of lighting in the evening mood as well. So only a few things left in our left to be done in our painting. It's just like the reflections from the car, as well as I'm going to enhance a little bit of the lighting reflections on the foreground as well. So whenever I do this eyelet thing, I want to make sure that I squint my eyes and see where it goes. And you can see as soon as we add those eyelets, the warmer eyelets in the foreground, that came all the way in the front, and everything goes in distance. And I also want that light reflecting on the people as well, since they are closer to the shop. So I'll be keep enhancing it. Still I'm happy with it. And I also whenever it comes to eyelets, I take 2 minutes and I set my time, and whatever eyelets I can put in 2 minutes, and that's it. I won't do anything else after that, and that way you don't go crazy or overwork your work. And that's it, folks. And I think the painting came out pretty good. So now it's your turn. Take my drawing template and reference, and before you start, have a vision and motive, or else find a reference that inspires you and take that reference and match that mood to my reference or your own reference. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel for more videos like this one every week on Saturday. Share with your friends and fellow artists who might benefit from these tips and techniques. If you want me to cover any of the subjects in watercolors, write me at watercolorimpressions@gmail.com or comment below. And good luck with your painting, folks.